Now, since I've been in Australia, I have been aware of some incredible changes taking place here, and really fast changes, really big developments in renewable energy, in electric ground transport, in grid infrastructure, all those things. And I wanted to talk to someone who was kind of on the inside of all that. And I came across this organization called Boundless Earth, which is a kind of funding group to help start up clean tech and electric transport companies get going. And it's founded by a man called Cannon-Brookes, who was the co-founder of Atlassian Software, who lives in Australia, an extraordinary man. And the guy who is the CEO of Boundless Earth is a man called Eytan Lenko, who lives in Melbourne. And he's an absolutely amazing man. He's involved in the financing in a world, the finance world of and software world of how to transform the energy industry and the energy system that we all live with. So a really fascinating man to talk to. Such a thrill to have him on the show. We cover a very wide range of topics, and I think you'll be fascinated by it. Please welcome to the Fully Charged podcast, Mr. Eytan Lenko from Boundless Earth. Eytan, thank you so much for finding time to talk to us. This is really, I'm amazed at the stuff I've learned since I've been in Australia. It's been a real change. I can sense a real change here.
2022 was a big shifting point in Australia and attitude to getting on with it, for sure.
But then, does Boundless Earth predate that change? I mean, when was Boundless Earth set up?
No, so Boundless, we started talking about, so Boundless Earth is, it's a vehicle for, so Mike Cannon-Brookes, the co-founder of Atlassian, he made a climate pledge in 2021, just before COP then, saying that he was going to commit $1.5 billion towards climate solutions through investment and through advocacy. And so Boundless came about as part of that pledge.
Right.
So we started talking about that at the end of 2021, and we worked out what the vision of Boundless is, how we would work. So the vision of Boundless is to have Australia on track to being a renewable energy superpower by 2030, and we can talk about what a renewable energy superpower means. And that we would do that by using the tools of philanthropy, investments, and direct advocacy, because Mike has got a pretty good big profile in Australia, and he's pretty outspoken on these issues. So we started hiring the team and getting going probably around February 2022. So 2022 was the year that we really got going.
So the way I think I heard about what you were doing was through the Good Car Company. So there is a connection. I mean, can you just explain that connection? Because I think I've done a podcast with Anthony from Good Car Company, but it's quite nice to get the other side of it.
Yeah, sure. So the way we had to, when we got started, and we wanted to stay a small agile team, and when you think about Australia becoming a renewable energy superpower, there's like an insane number of things that we need to do to get there. Where do you even start? And if but I'm from the software, from the tech industry. As is Mike. And when you used to develop software, the old way of doing it, the waterfall method, is that you would document out exactly what you wanted your piece of software to be. So you'd get these hundreds of pages, stacks of requirements that you can go and give to your developers, and that would go away for like 3 years and then come back with something terrible that you didn't even want in the first place, because there was no feedback loop, in there at all.
Right.
And so in software, this agile methodology was developed to deal with that, where you bite things off like a small chunk at a time. You do it till it's done. You kind of get the feedback on how that is, and you allow yourself to kind of change and pick different priorities as you go. So we wanted to adopt that methodology for Boundless. So we call those kind of chunks of work epics. And an epic to us is really a topic where we feel like with a big push, so if we throw philanthropy, investment, advocacy at it, we can get the ball rolling, something that doesn't have a lot of momentum, get the momentum up. Or at the other end of the scale, something where with a big push, we can just kind of get it done. And as you've observed, EVs must be the lowest hanging fruit in Australia in terms of where a big push could get something done. Like, we have the highest take up of rooftop solar in the world, yet
Right.
we import all of our oil,
Yeah.
We have, pretty expensive oil, relative to a lot of the rest of the world. But, we've got super cheap renewable energy as well. So, for energy, for a million different reasons, EVs are a no-brainer in Australia. And yet, at the beginning of 2022, we found ourselves stuck in a position where, less than 2% of new cars sold were EVs. We didn't have any federal incentive schemes to get EVs on the road. We're one of, I think it's just us and Russia that don't have fuel efficiency standards. Like, there's a whole lot of reasons why Australia's lagging.
Because I didn't know that is an extraordinary fact. That I didn't realise that. So it is literally Australia and Russia don't give a toss about fuel efficiency. That is quite.
It's mad.
Because
you can kind of understand, but Australia,
it's the least surprising fact I've ever heard about Russia, and the most surprising about Australia, which is it is extraordinary. Wow, sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but that is quite.
Okay.
I've not heard that before.
So we thought, all right, as our first epic, what better thing to kick off with than electric vehicles? So we had to think about a strategy around that, like what's the change that we want to try to make happen. And, we did our research, and it won't be surprised to you that, we found that, I think most countries, they kind of, when they get to say 5 to 10% of new cars sold being EVs, and for that to happen, you have to have enough in place that is kind of like the tipping point where you go from, 10% to 20% to like what we're seeing in Germany and the UK, up to 35, 40% pretty quickly. So our goal was to have Australia hit 10% of new cars sold being EVs by 2024 next year. And we had 8 different initiatives on what it would take to make that happen, including fuel efficiency standards. And then we went out to find who are the best partners out there that could actually execute on those initiatives, both from a philanthropy and investment space. And so, we can talk through some of the stuff that we funded. It's really exciting programs, but in the investment space, we were really interested in that. Even if we do everything right and we get EVs supply coming to Australia and the demand up, there's still going to be a gap at this lower end of the market.
Right.
And the Good Car Company had this fantastic model where they're bringing in second-hand EVs from Japan and the UK, other right-hand drive markets. And what they really needed was some support. They sell the cars in Australia first. I'm sorry, they get the contract for someone to buy the car. Then they've got to go and buy the car in Japan, ship it to Australia, fix it up. And there's a funding gap. They only get the money once the cars gets to Australia.
Sold.
So we worked out with them a line of credit to basically help fund them to bring have the capacity to bring in 10 times more cars than they do at the moment. And so that's what they've been doing now, ramping up to bring in a lot more kind of affordable cars. They sell them here for $20,000.
Right, because that's the kind of, at the moment, I think the pinch point that we're certainly experiencing in the UK is the emergence of a second-hand market, because it was a thing that I hadn't really considered. I've got sort of fallen into this world of electric vehicles, which of course, by definition, were all brand new. And I'd had one new petrol car in my life, which I bought in my early 50s, because it was the dumbest thing I ever did.
Yes.
Now looking back, like, why would you buy a new car? And then suddenly all the cars are new. I used to buy 8th-hand cars. That's what, when people talk about second-hand. No, mate, those are too flash. 10th-hand, that's what a rust bucket, as many young people do. And the fact that I think that's the big shift, that once that second-hand market emerges as a thing where there are literally millions of second-hand cars around, that's going to change things very, very rapidly. But I think it's a brilliant idea, though, to kind of bring that, cheaper, more affordable cars through now. And it's going to be likely most of those are going to be like Nissan Leafs and Renault Zoes and things like that, I'm assuming. And then a few Teslas, I guess. But because that's the other thing I've noticed, is that the people I speak to now who have electric cars often didn't have a lifelong passion for cars. They're sort of petrol head car people, and some of those have transitioned and they love Teslas and they love Porsche and whatever. But they're a very small. It's the group of people who go, what's if you ask them what sort of car you've got, and they say a blue one. Those are the people that I think. And I was like that. I don't know. It's blue. It's got definitely got 4 wheels, and it's got a steering wheel. not that obsessed with
It's
it.
also stressful for redheads because I remember when I first got my Tesla and I was driving it around, I was so excited about how fast it was. And like you, I wasn't really a car person before then. And I pulled up to the traffic lights and a Lamborghini pulled up next to me. And I knew that the Tesla Model 3 could probably beat this Lamborghini. Yeah. So I'm like, awesome, I'm gonna race this Lamborghini. But I had no way to indicate to the Lamborghini driver that I wanted to race because, the traditional way is to kind of rev your engine, which you can't do on an EV. So I don't know, maybe a Tesla needs to put in like a rev your engine mode to play out over the speakers or something. So I didn't.
I've only done it once, and it was very funny. It was with I think, of course, I don't know what the car was. It was black, a BMW. It was definitely a BMW with very big exhaust pipes. This is in the UK, and the guy was so excited. And I was in a Model S, really early days Model S, and we just happened to be at the front of traffic lights on a highway, but in London. So really, there's lots of speed restrictions. And I knew the road really well. And he went, go on, do it, go on, do it. You got to I want to see it go. And I was going, no, it's not my car. It's a press car. I can't. No, it doesn't matter. Do it. And then he just roared off this huge cloud of swirling smoke coming out of his exhaust. And I went, all right. And then I sort of caught up with him so easily, I can't tell you, because this is a Model S. What was it called? It was the early performance one.
Like the P80D, P100D.
The P80D, thank you. The P80, that was it. It was a performance one. So it was a few years ago. And of course, I caught up with him so easily. And then he was going, and he was really enjoying the fact that I caught up with him. And he was roaring ahead. And I just put my foot down a bit and then slammed the brakes on because there was a speed camera that I knew very well. And I left him for dead. There was no hope of him keeping up. But then as I slowed down to 40 miles an hour, he overtook me at probably 60. The light went, he got it. And I always felt a bit bad about that because because he wasn't being like aggressive, nasty. He was really enjoying himself. It was, anyway.
Hilarious.
And that's I've never been in a car that could do that in my life. I never had a car that could drive that fast. Which is, and it is.
Well, what's scary is you start thinking about the bigger trucks like the Rivian. The performance Rivian can do 0 to 100 in 3.5 seconds. And you get these crazy big trucks going so fast.
There's quite a lot of there's quite a lot of room to be gently critical of a large amount of electric vehicles being released. The big ones it does seem crazy, anyway, that's a whole other topic. We don't need to go there. But the thing that fascinates me is the emergence of in some ways on a community level. I'm just wondering whether you have anything to do with that. So I've been hearing about various little towns in Australia that have gone, hang on, we can make our own fuel here. We can make our own power. We can store it with community batteries, which is just, the first time I heard the term community battery was about a town in Australia.
Oh, yeah.
Just that sort of stuff really makes sense. And it kind of, in a way, that is a clue to the potential of Australia being a renewable superpower, because I think one of the critical things that I keep hearing about, and in a way it's the optimistic sort of airy fairy one, is what this changing technology does mean. Energy can be decentralized, democratically owned, locally owned, benefit the people who benefit from it more than it used to be when we had to dig up coal, ship the coal on a train, put it in a power station, burn it in a power station, send the power, you have to pay for that. That changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a story. I mean, generally, one of the reasons why that Australia's been slow to really pick up climate action in a big way is that I think the story in Australia was, we're a mining country, we're the world's biggest coal exporter, we're the world's biggest liquid gas exporter. That's the source of our revenue, and if we stop doing that, then where will we be as a country? And climate was always seen as this kind of like a cost. You have to spend money. It's like this thing, and also back in the day, I think around the world, the narrative on climate was one of sacrifice. Like you've got to turn off your lights, you've got to stop flying, you've got to do less. You've got to do less. And the renewable energy superpower story is different. It says that Australia has the world's biggest renewable resource. Like we've got some of the world's best sun, we've got some of the world's best wind. Where it's not windy, it's sunny. Where it's not sunny and windy, in a lot of places it's both. And so that means we easily have the opportunity to be producing some of the cheapest energy in the world at huge quantities. And then when you have cheap energy, you can do energy intensive things like, making steel or making hydrogen or all these things which are very jobs rich and form the basis of new export industries to replace the coal and gas. And so that, and I think 80%, the maths is that 80% of those jobs that those industries would create would be in those regional areas that you talk about that are currently fossil fuel intensive, or people working in coal mines and that sort of thing. So it actually pretty neatly replaces the current industry. So not only is that a good story about something that's kind of nice, the other story that we don't tell ourselves is, if we were the world's biggest typewriter exporters in 1981 and the PC had just come out, we wouldn't be so excited about that. We'd be probably freaked out that we're the world's biggest exporters of an obsolete technology. But that's what we are. We're coal is not, we don't get to choose how long we can export coal for. Our clients will choose that for us. So we really need to be on the front foot of developing what's next, which is, this is the only thing that's next. And it's a great opportunity. So how do we, turning this, and EVs are such a great symbolic example of this world being better. Do you know, once you drive in an EV, you can't compare. It's like, it's climate aside, it's a way better experience. And that applies for a lot of things. The next epic we did after EVs was home electrification, which is a similar story. If you have an induction cooktop or a heat pump in your home, it's cheaper to run, it's more comfortable, it's just a better experience. And you combine that with rooftop solar, and then all of a sudden, you're charging your car, you're running your dishwasher, you're heating your house, you're heating your hot water, all off the sun that's coming off the roof of your house. And you're basically living for free. So suddenly all the cost of living pressures and all that sort of stuff become really helpful. So it starts to become this really nice narrative, and that's how you get the community on board, and you get like this ambition loop of like the community getting onto it, politicians becoming more ambitious. So I think that's the momentum that we're trying to push.
Right, because that's one I've just thought about that, because I'm not used to it, so I'm very familiar with heat pumps. They've become as always with these things, they've suddenly become a political issue in the UK. But there's a huge uptake of heat pumps in the UK. But the one thing I'm not aware of, which we used last night for the first time in the little house we're in, is air conditioning. So I'm so unused to air conditioning. But last night it was so hot, and I've just seen that I've actually got an official Queensland government health warning for tomorrow for extreme heat. But but I don't know whether that technology. We've got a sort of thing up on the wall that goes and blows out deliciously cold air on an extremely hot night, like it did last night. I was so relieved to have that. But this is just a slightly technological question. We should do an episode about it. Has air conditioning equipment moved on? I have no idea how it works. I've never lived with it or known anything about it.
Well, yeah, it has. That's heat. An air conditioner just is a heat pump. So what's hilarious is that it goes in reverse. One way is heat, and the heat goes inside the house, and if you stand on the fan on the outside of the house, it's cold air coming out. And if you do it the other way around, when you turn on your air conditioner now, you stand outside and hot air will be coming out. And cold air will be going into the house. And what's hilarious is in Victoria, where I live, houses have been, we used to have a big gas field just outside of Victoria, or just outside of Melbourne. And so most houses are hooked up to gas, and they've got gas heating, and now gas prices have gone through the roof and people are stressing out about it. But most houses have air conditioners on the wall, and just by reflex they use the gas heating in winter and the air conditioning in summer. But they don't realize that the air conditioner has a heat button on it. They can also use their air conditioner to heat and not have to use gas at all. And that's like, it's some crazy number. It's like 40% of houses aren't even aware of that yet. So that's like, the lowest hanging fruit of all, a campaign to let people know that there's a heat button on their air conditioning system. Would do a lot.
But then another thing I'm slightly intrigued about is because every now and then you kind of get these glimmers of hope. So I'll quickly do the very obvious one of, big fossil fuel companies in the UK, Shell and BP, particularly Shell, are putting in, for example, high-speed electric car chargers at their petrol filling stations. And initially we went and saw the very first one they put in. So it was literally one. but it got used so much they then put in another one, and they got so much so that some of the forecourts, there's now one in London, they've taken all the petrol pumps away and it's just rapid chargers.
I love
But
it.
it's where there used to be what they called a profit-making petrol station. But I mean, anyway, whatever. And it's got a shop and a toilet and Wi-Fi, and it's always full. It's constantly in use, and it's in the middle of a very built-up urban area in West London, Fulham. But so that example of traditional fuel companies
Do they put out the front of that? Do they have the cost of electricity instead of the cost of petrol?
I don't think they do. They've got to. No, I don't think they do. But I might be wrong, and I don't want to. But when I went there, they didn't have it then. It may be that was a while ago. But what I'm getting to is that there are huge mining industries in Australia. Massive ones. And I'm wondering what the attitudes of the owners and the CEOs and the management boards and all that is of them towards what you're proposing. And I mean, because my knowledge of Mike Cannon-Brookes is very limited, but I know that he's not a poor man, and he's clearly had a bit of an impact on Australian, corporate culture, if nothing else, because he's gone, no, hang on a minute, guys, let's not burn coal, let's do something else. To have someone that is a successful, respected member of the, wealthy people in Australia, he does stand out. He's saying, I don't want to burn coal anymore. Let's stop burning coal. Let's do something else. I just wonder what the reaction is from, I don't know the individuals, but the likes of the mining industry in Australia.
Yeah. Well, I'll answer it in a couple of ways. So first one, so Australia, I think we're one of the few countries in the world that has all the minerals required to build batteries in one country kind of thing. And I think, we're the world's biggest, exporter of lithium. For example, I think 60% of the lithium in the batteries at Tesla is
from Australia.
From Australia. Yeah. But we do mainly just dig it up and ship it out. Like we don't
ship it out as raw material.
Processing raw materials. That's what Australia's great at, and we need to get better at processing those minerals more in Australia, which is something that we'll do an epic on coming up. And as part of actually the electric vehicles epic that we did, we funded this new coalition called Supercharge Australia, which brings together a bunch of the players in the field with some American knowledge to try to start that coordination and the beginning of a battery manufacturing industry in Australia as well, because we can't just be importing all of the cars and all the batteries just only shipping out the raw materials seems like a wasted opportunity for Australia. So I think there is definitely recognition, definitely as a revenue, there's a bunch of critical minerals mining companies, and it's interesting to see the split. Like generally, another reason that Australia went slow on climate is there was such a strong mining lobby in Australia that were dominated by coal and gas that were working really hard to slow things down and to get rid of the carbon price once it was introduced here and all that sort of stuff. And now we're seeing a bit more of a split in the mining industry, where you've got the players that are more diversified and seeing that this is where the future is, and copper and nickel and all that sort of stuff is where the future lies, and de-emphasis on coal and those sorts of things, to the pure coal players who don't really have any other choice, who are trying hard to kind of keep that going. But I think we all know who's going to win in the end. So that's shifting. And we talked about 2022 being a big year in Australia for climate action. There were two reasons for that. We had an election where we have a new government that's much more climate positive. But as you brought up, Mike Cannon-Brookes, he ran this really interesting campaign last year to, so Australia's biggest polluting company is AGL, which is, our biggest electricity generator and retailer, predominantly with coal generators. And they wanted to split into two companies, into a coal company that ran just all the coal generators, and a small kind of renewable company, which would keep the brand that had the few renewable assets they have, and basically they would just, then that they could go on and present themselves as a nice renewables company. But the problem is that this coal company would then be a pure coal company with no incentive to shut down their coal.
Yeah.
So Mike ran a campaign. First brought in Brookfield, the infrastructure investor, to make a bid to take AGL private and basically block that demerger and then
Right.
do the work to actually shut down those coal power stations and replace them with renewable energy. And when that got rejected, he took a more activist approach and bought 11% of the company through his investment arm, Grok.
Right.
And then ran a campaign to actually convince other shareholders and retail investors to vote against the demerger, and because that had to go to a general meeting, and that worked. The demerger was blocked.
Wow.
The CEO and the chair and half the board stepped down.
Wow.
New board members have just been elected that are more on board, and AGL have moved. And the common story of 2022, both at the election at AGL, is that we're now so far down this path that if you're not on board, if you're a leader and you're not on board with this, whether you're in government or whether you're in a boardroom or whether you're in mining, if you're not on board, you're going to be removed because it's not good enough in 2023, 2022 to not understand the opportunities and the risks and get on board with this. So I think the shock of that has really has changed the boardrooms, the atmosphere in Australia from this theoretical thing called climate action doing something to this is actually really happening. Yeah. How do we get involved?
How do we get? And I mean, because that's always the thing that's staggered me. I guess because I'm excited by engineering and technology and, breakthrough stuff, very much as an observer. I definitely couldn't write a piece of software to save my life. And I've mended a gearbox in a Morris 30, 40, 50 years ago. So I'm not completely hopeless, but close. But the excitement of the opportunities and the possible benefits and the challenges are so amazing that's what always baffles me about people who just want to carry on, just dig up the coal, put it on the train, ship it to the power station, or put it on a ship. And I saw a couple of coal ships leaving Australia not long ago from the coast. And you go, why would you still? Why? It's not interesting. It might work at the moment. But it's really boring.
Also, as an engineer, someone with an engineering background, it's just like you say, it's exciting. And what's weird to me is that we talk about this future, say where we're a renewable energy superpower or everything's renewable, and suddenly everyone puts their engineering hats on. Even if you're not an engineer, and it's like, oh well, what about the transmission and the solar, the dispatchable energy, and the solar's not there all the time, and it's like, all right, well. That's why we have engineers. Like you just tell them what you want them to do and they'll get it done. When we're talking about building gas pipelines, people aren't like, oh, well, what about the
pressure over a distance?
The leakage rates and the pressure falls. Like no one, it's only when you talk about renewable energy, everyone's suddenly an engineer or, EVs, oh, well, what about, so it's like, dude,
it's one of my,
we've got, engineers have got this. We can get it done. We just need to be given permission and the funding to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of my favorite tweets that I get less now is, like it's a sigh of a middle-aged man. Oh, has anyone thought about the impact that these cars... And I go, do you know what? Yes, they have. And they started thinking about it in 2006 and they've thought about it every day of their professional lives since then and they've got solutions. You've just thought about it now in 2023 and thought that's not going to work. Well, yes, but it's a really hard thing for people to get their heads around because I think it is a paradigm shift that we're talking about. It's not just, we used to have leaded petrol, now we have unleaded petrol. We used to not have catalytic converters, now we do.
I think the trick's to change that understanding of the shift, and I think humans naturally become kind of nitpickers and go a bit negative, and you've got to change that. Like, what are the good things about this change? Like a story I tell when I'm talking about giving a talk on EVs is, I got my Tesla. It was my son's birthday party in summer in Victoria and in Melbourne, and we have these crazy hot days sometimes. It's like 42 degrees Celsius. So we had this 42-degree day, and in our family, the birthday tradition is a ice cream cake. So my wife sent me out to go and pick up the ice cream cake. So I picked it up, and I'm on my way home, and she said, "Oh, can you pick up some fruit? I'm going to do a fruit salad." I'm like, well, I can't. I've got ice cream cake in the car. It's 42 degrees. There's no way I can do that. And then I'm like, actually, I've got this. I'm in this Tesla. I can set the air conditioning to be, as cold as possible. It can run when I'm out of the car. I've got no guilt about this because I charge it off the solar on my roof anyway. So I just parked the car, left it, turned the car into a fridge basically. Went and shop for the fruit. I came back and the ice cream cake was fine and brought it all back home. And it's like, would you ever imagine doing that in a petrol car, not in a million years. Like there's actually, it opens up, and that's what's exciting. You've got all these new use cases. Like that's a small example, but with all this stuff, like the things that we're going to be doing in this paradigm of cheap, clean, guilt-free energy. It's like when apps started coming on the iPhone. You never expected Airbnb or Uber or whatever to come out of that. Like we're just going to see this whole new paradigm of creativity, and that's what we need to get excited about.
And I mean, one of the things that I've sort of become very aware of, which I think you seem to have, and we've kind of brushed on this already, but the experience. I've never been to Sub-Saharan Africa, but I was involved in a conference in Africa recently, and that was a really interesting topic of discussion. Was the jump that African nations made from this is in telecoms, where they did have a telephone system, but it was totally unreliable. It relied on copper wires being strung up on poles over vast distances, and copper's valuable, so the copper would disappear and all those things. And cell phones totally jumped that. So they've now got really sophisticated, high-speed cell phone connectivity. They all use cell phones. That's how they pay. That's how their finances work. It's they're advanced to us. And I saw this in India, which was really remarkable. Some of the poorest people I will ever have seen in my life. And no matter how I try and live a guilt-free life, I feel guilty. Just because of when you witness that, you go, okay, I am so overwhelmingly privileged, it makes me vomit, But they all had cell phones, everyone, because that's how they communicate. It's how they pay for stuff. That's how they do stuff. And they kind of missed out that kind of messy landline, fax machine, dial-up modem, all those steps we went through. They just went, straight to cell phones. They work really well, once that technology. And I think that is an interesting thing with electric vehicles is that, and when I say electric vehicles, I mean electric ground transport. So from a mono wheel to a 60-ton truck, that the advantages of electric transportation have been adopted so fast. I haven't been back, but Mumbai now has the majority of the tuk-tuks and the scooters are electric. When I was there, none of them were. And I was there in 2016. So in that sort of 5-6 year period, it's just flipped over. And I've seen a fabulous photograph that a friend who lives in Mumbai sent of a charging point in Mumbai, which is like an octopus of wires coming down a pole with sockets. I mean, it is supremely homemade. And there were just hundreds of scooters all piled up against each other where they're charging, on the corner of a street. But the air quality is improved. It's when you see that, the advantages are so huge for people who aren't driving 2-ton SUVs, that people who can't afford to buy those
second order impacts. We funded as part of the EV Epic, bunch of work to really get out there the impact of EVs on health and pollution, all that sort of stuff. Same thing in home electrification, gas cooktops. There's so much research now that shows, you're literally, it's crazy when you think about it. You're literally
because we've used them. I used them all my life.
Yeah. And, now there's all this research increases, the risks of childhood asthma by, 15, 20%, it releases all these noxious fumes in your house. Obviously, but it's just not something we were aware of. And, you shift this technology like induction, which is actually better, it's faster and all that sort of stuff and cheaper to run. And it doesn't give you asthma and fill your home with noxious chemicals. So, I think, again, it's like this story of like we're heading to this place that's actually not just better for the environment, but better for us and better for in every aspect.
And I think it's also that because I've realised in the last 10 years that I'm an idiotically stupid early adopter. So I'll always try stuff. And, in some ways that's a huge advantage and you do get the benefits of it early on, but occasionally you get it wrong. So I had an induction hob 25 years ago that was rubbish. I'm not going to lie, and I was so proud of it. And I was going, this is an induction hob. You could not turn it on. I'd bend my finger into stupid shape trying to get the damn thing. And we now got an induction hob where I don't even think about it. Just go beep, beep, and it's on. The technology is improved basically. And that's the thing that is a difficult thing to explain is, when I first drove an electric car in 2009, all the fears and anxieties and criticisms that you might hear about electric cars now were totally valid. There was no charging infrastructure. It had very limited range. The battery was rubbish. The car was terrible. Everything about it was true, except I drove 12,000 miles in a year on an electric car for virtually nothing because I had solar panels on my house previously. And that's what kind of flipped it for me. I went, oh, hang on, I can't make petrol. I can't drill up oil and make petrol in my back garden, but I can actually power a car. Anyway, that side of it. But the mindset, it's that mindset to tell people, look, if an electric car is expensive new today, in 5 years' time it'll cost the same as a petrol car. In 10 years' time it'll be cheaper. It's already cheaper to run, and it's waiting for those incremental improvements to kind of kick in, which I think they are. I think that's what we're seeing now.
And it's exciting to think about the second-hand market because EVs, as you know, are so much more reliable and have so much less to go wrong in them. Like, you used to look at a second-hand car and you'd have to think about, all the different bits, the radiator and all the things that could go wrong. The clutch and the gearbox. Yeah. Now you're going to have these second-hand cars that actually can. Like, the battery's the only limiting factor. And I think, everything seems to be showing that the batteries last longer than we were expecting them to last. So you're going to have these completely trouble-free second-hand vehicles that are going to be amazing. Kids, when they get their first car in 5-10 years' time, like, it's going to be a very different experience than what we had, where we had these rust buckets that were falling apart.
Yeah.
An EV, and maybe that solves. It'll be interesting. Like, I remember with computers, you used to have to get a new computer every 2 years because your computer would be so slow after 2 years. And now with an iPad or something like that, you hold on to it for like 5-7 years, and it's completely fine. So I think that's what will happen with EVs as well. Like with the over-the-air updates and that sort of thing. Like, my Tesla's 3 years old, but I've got the latest software. It's completely different to what it was 3 years ago. It's getting new features. It's like, why would I get a new one? There's no reason. So we'll hold on to them for longer too.
Which is also different. I mean, it's a different business model as well, isn't it? Because I think that's what that the more I've learned about. I basically knew nothing about the automotive industry 13 years ago, and I've learned quite a lot. But one of the things is they're complex business models. They can sell a petrol car for almost no profit because they know they're going to make so much money out of the servicing, and that's challenged very profoundly. But one of the things I'd love to talk about is the in a sense countering the negative responses about non-reliable renewables and the fact that it's not sunny at night time. That's one of those. I've had those comments. Has anyone ever thought that it's not sunny at night time?
That the sun doesn't shine at night.
Yeah, the sun doesn't.
Never come across that problem.
Yeah, they've never considered it for a moment. But the one of the colossal projects that Mr. Cannon-Brookes is proposing is it the Northern Territories? They really like a mega solar farm. I mean, just off the scale. Is that still in process?
Yeah, so we talked about renewable energy superpower and using cheap energy to manufacture and stuff in Australia. Obviously, the other way to export, so that would export energy embodied in those products. Right. The other way to do it is kind of literal, like build a cable between Australia and Asia and literally export the electrons over the cable. So that's what that project is. It's to build the world's biggest solar farm by a long way up in the Northern Territory of Australia, along with the world's biggest battery, and then the world's longest undersea cable connecting Darwin to Singapore, and that would power 20% of Singapore's electricity.
Right.
So that's the idea, and it's been funded and going well. I mean, the two key investors in that have been Mike Cannon-Brookes and Andrew Forrest, who owns Fortescue, a big iron ore company, and they've recently come to they've had a difference in opinion. Andrew Forrest is very strong on hydrogen and has set up Fortescue Future Industries and has this he wants to develop hydrogen, so he wants the project to basically just supply Darwin with a lot of energy that he could then turn into hydrogen and ship the hydrogen. And the founders and Mike's team want the original vision of shipping the electricity.
The electrons,
so there's a bit of an argument at the moment between which way that the company's going to go. That should resolve in the next few weeks. But either way, that idea of supplying Australia being a supplier of renewable energy in one form or the other to the rest of the world is what's behind it. And there's another big project, the Australian Renewable Energy Hub in Western Australia, that was recently bought by BP, I think, which is a similar thing, like just an absolutely massive solar and wind farm that would be used to create hydrogen to export. I mean, we need to solve how you actually export hydrogen, whether it's through ammonia or shipping or whatever. But that's the vision.
It is. I mean, it is a. I think let's not go down the hydrogen rabbit hole, because I've fallen down. I've fallen down that one many times. But I mean, it is a fascinating difference. But that is also quite a good. I'd forgotten about Andrew Forrest, so I had heard of him, and I don't know talk about that row, but I had been aware of that. Sorry, I'd forgotten about it. But it's interesting that he runs a huge mining operation, and really, and he is actually thinking, what else are we going to do? There's a fabulous, there's a really fabulous graphic that you may have seen. It's been doing the rounds recently, which shows in sort of cube lumps the scale of what we extract from the earth. Because we say, what about lithium? Lithium's going to destroy the world. And this is, lithium, you can just about see it's it's like 2 pixel scale cube. And at the other end of the thing is iron ore, which is the size of a massive Amazon warehouse. It's a colossal scale of the iron ore that we extract to make everything that we have, But then that is then dwarfed by the tonnage of fossil fuels that we extract and burn each year. That makes iron ore look like a matchbox, and it's so big. And that's when you then go, okay, that's what powers the world that we've all grown up in. And that's what we've got to change. And it's a huge change, but it will make the knock-on effects of, for instance, if Australia had 1 million electric cars, you would import 1 million less gallons of fuel which means that you don't have those ships that are the dirtiest and the most fuel inefficient. If you push that much oil through the sea, I've been learning about that. It's become my recent obsession, reading all about international shipping. But you fill a tanker with
40% of international shipping is shipping oil and gas and coal.
And also the ships themselves, because of the nature of the cargo, they float deeper in the water. So like a container ship that's colossal is actually, in comparison, not as heavy as oil. All that oil in a ship is really heavy. So that there's huge amounts of an oil tanker underwater, which means you've got to push that huge, which means you use more fuel. Anyway, it is, that's, I think, what is, I mean, it must be a really exciting job, in a sense, for the team.
Yeah, and the way we've set it up with Epics means that we don't get bored. We're always looking at new areas. And so what we do, we spend 3 months, as I said, on the Epic, finding all the partners, and then we fund the partners, and then we move on to the next thing. So our partners are funded out to do work for like the next 2 years, and we fund a coordinator to stay with them and make sure they're all talking to each other and that it's it's tracking okay. But we move on, so we can stay a small team because we're just always working on what the next thing is. So we worked on EVs for our first one, then we did home electrification, which we just finished, and now our third one, we're kind of getting our head around. All right, so good policies are coming through now. We're starting to see through all the work that's happening out there and acceleration in all these places, but looking forward a bit, it's not going to take a lot to realize that what's going to really hurt us is not having the people to do all the work we need to do, the skills and the workforce. So that's what IEPIC at the moment is focusing on, the workforce and skills. How do we make sure that we don't, we have enough electricians to install all the heat pumps that we need? How do we make sure that there's stories out there that climate jobs are actually great jobs? I think when people think of working in climate, they just think of someone standing in a field hammering in solar panels, where an accountant can be working in a climate job. There's amazing, working in advanced manufacturing, all this stuff. They're all climate jobs. So we want people to be excited about that, enrolling into those courses, transferring in from their other jobs into these jobs. So our ambition is to have 100,000 more people working in climate in Australia by 2027. And we're just working through now. Like, we're going out to partners now to see who wants to join us in helping to make that happen. Yeah,
that is that is very good news to hear, because that is absolutely critical. Because and it is fascinating that seems to be a global problem is that the skill shortage, which you think that's crazy because there's quite a lot of us on the planet. You'd think there'd be enough people to fix, to do that sort of work. I mean, and even, I think we mentioned it earlier, but software, if, there's the failing I see of the old incumbent automotive manufacturers is nothing to do with the drivetrain and the design and the fitting it's the software. It's always the software. And you've experienced this. It makes Tesla's software makes me angry because it works. So I go, why can't I do an app that works on my Tesla? Why can't it do it on the Ford or the I have had
Prius. You get into a Toyota and try to play with Toyota software after coming out of a Tesla. It's like,
it's painful.
Yeah, that's true. And the other reason that the traditional auto industry has struggled has been, one of the things we're going to tackle as part of this initiative as well, as part of this epic, is the climate awareness and skills of the board and executive class as well. I mean, they're the people that are setting the strategy and deciding what direction a company goes in. And there's just very, very little understanding of the climate opportunity and climate skills. I mean, like, it's insane that Toyota has not gone full, has still not fully committed to EVs. I mean, what's going on the board at Toyota? Obviously, there's a big blind spot there. Those people, frankly, shouldn't be on the board of a big car company if they can't see this coming. I mean,
it's been pretty obvious for quite a few years. And I mean, the fact that Tesla, a Tesla Model 3, really what I think of as a fairly high-end car, is outselling the Toyota Camry, which is like an absolute, I mean, that's got to be, I think it has sounded alarm bells in Toyota finally, but God, it's taken long enough. Yeah, and it's such a shame. I mean, that in particular case in point, it is such a shame because that's how I got into the whole thing. I had got a lift in a Prius in 2000 in Los Angeles. And I went, what the hell? How did it do that? It pulled away from some traffic lights and it just it felt like it was being towed. I went, how'd you do that? The woman who was driving me said, it's a hybrid, which meant nothing. When you think back, I'd never heard that. But, what the hell is a hybrid? But so they were really at the forefront at that time. They were really an extraordinary company, did amazing work with that. Yeah, no, it is a real shame.
And so, I mean, at the highest level, that's what we don't want to happen to Australia, like sitting on our laurels as a coal and gas exporter and watching the world electrify. We've got all the advantages in our favor, just like Toyota does.
Absolutely.
And we just can't let that, that moment kind of pass us by.
Because, I mean, finally, I just would love to go through that. It's a discussion I've had a couple of times is, which country do you think will be 100% renewably powered first? Well, the answer is Costa Rica. So that's already happened, but which is the next one, and I mean,
does Scotland count as a country?
And Scotland is a lot of the time. But so that is happening around the world already. But I love the argument about, well, has anyone thought that it's impossible to be 100% renewably powered? Well, yes, they have. And yes, we can. But I mean, it does strike me now I'm here that it's so plausible. It's a really complex argument in the UK, very crowded, small island, but lots of offshore wind and blah, blah, blah. There's lots of opportunities. But here you just go, surely it could be done here.
It should be Australia.
It should be Australia. Yeah.
And we are, I mean, we are leading the world in a lot of areas. Rooftop solar. We're running some really good big experiments now with grid forming inverters, which can replace the synchronous generation that the coal does to set the frequency in the grid. So you're doing that through electronically rather than needing an actual big turning thing. Right. So we've got a bunch of big batteries and more of those that are coming online. We've got some big hydro projects. So I think we need to put our foot on the pedal in terms of building out transmission infrastructure, but the new government seems to have a plan for that, so they just need to get that going. And I think there's a lot of the remote grid, Western Australia and the Northern Territory, that are kind of cut off from the rest of the grid, that are really, they have days where they're, Western Australia, they have days where the solar generation is 80%, 90% of demand. So, they're already at the forefront of how do you deal with that as a system. So really, I think we've got everything in place. We just need the political will to actually shut down the coal generation. There's unlimited potential for investment. Investors want to build this stuff, but the coal power stations are kind of like, standing
Right,
their ground.
they are.
They need to, you
right.
need to build the new generation before you can shut those down. But you can't build the new generation while they're still going. So that needs to be kind of planned out, which we've done a lot of work around as well. And then, there should be nothing holding us back. Like, the official target is for Australia to be 83% renewables by 2030, set by the new government. And I can't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to achieve 100% if we set our minds to it.
Yeah. On that very optimistic, positive, but realistically grounded note, I think we should wind it up. But it's been an absolute joy talking to you. I think it really has, and I really wish you the very best. And that last bit you told me about training people is so painfully obvious. That is really critically important. I'm really glad you're focusing on that. What are they called? They're called epics. Are they called
epics?
No, yes, yes.
It's from it's from that software terminology. So it's big geek.
Right.
But, it's epic. Like we're gonna get something done. We're gonna push things. Yeah, epic. So you can get that into the general parlance of world. We can all start talking about epics. Because I think that's the other thing we talked about. Sorry, just to finish off on, climate action. I think it's bit of a momentum game. Once you start seeing progress, everything starts going up these exponential curves and start happening. So you need to give things a push at kind of critical times to make sure that they kind of get on that pathway. And even if you bring things forward a few years, every year is critical at the moment. So I think the more that we get our head around, not sitting around and overthinking things for years and years and years and just getting on with it, and the engineers will work stuff out as we we and they'll be so stressed out about having the perfect solution up front, then we'll get to our destination faster. So that's what we're trying to achieve.
Brill. All power to you. Thank you so much for talking to us today. It was really good.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
I'd really like to thank Eytan for his time talking to us today. I think what Boundless Earth are doing is extraordinary. As you heard, we're going to try and get them on again. They're doing such amazing things, and they're always come out with new projects, as you heard in that episode. So that's all. Please do subscribe to the Fully Charged podcast to listen to these amazing people we're managing to talk to. It really is a privilege for us. Please do have a look at the Patreon link, which is in the show notes beneath this episode. And tell your mates about it. Tell your friends and family to tune into the Fully Charged podcast, because we've got some incredible people lined up to talk to. But that's it. As always, if you have been, thank you for listening.